The pickup truck rattled to a stop, dust swirling like ghosts in the Montana dusk, and I knew I was out of options. At 24, with $47 in my bank account and a duffel bag of regrets, I'd taken this ranch job to survive, not to find myself. But when I saw him, leaning against the barn with a gaze that cut through the twilight, everything changed. My name's Ethan Caldwell, and I wasn't supposed to be here. I grew up in Chicago, where skyscrapers blocked out the stars and my parents' expectations blocked out everything else. They wanted a lawyer, a doctor, someone to parade at their cocktail parties. Instead, they got me, a college dropout with a knack for screwing things up. After coming out at 19, I'd been on my own, scraping by with odd jobs and a stubborn refusal to crawl back home. This ranch gig, advertised on a sketchy job board, was my last shot before I'd be sleeping in my truck. The double-bar ranch sprawled across miles of rugged plains, framed by mountains that looked like they'd been carved by an angry god. I stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and felt the weight of my desperation settle heavier. The ad promised room, board, and a paycheck for manual labor. I could shovel manure, mend fences, whatever they didn't need to know I'd never touched a horse. That's when I saw him. He was tall, maybe 28, with shoulders broad enough to carry the world and green eyes that seemed to see right through me. His denim jacket was faded, his cowboy hat tilted just so, and the way he stood easy, like the land belonged to him, made my stomach twist in a way I didn't expect. Ethan Caldwell. His voice was low, rough like the wind over the plains. Yeah, I said, shoving my hands in my pockets to hide their trembling. I'm Lucas Hayes, foreman here. You ever worked a ranch before? I hesitated. Lying was easier, but those eyes made me think twice. No, but I'm a fast learner. He studied me, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Hope so. We don't got time for city boys who can't keep up. The next morning hit like a freight train. Dawn broke cold and sharp, and I was up before the sun, hauling feed bags that weighed more than my pride. The other hands, grizzled men with calloused hands and no patience for newbies, barely spared me a glance. Lucas, though, was everywhere. He barked orders, showed me how to swing a hammer without breaking my thumb, and watched me like he was waiting for me to quit. I didn't. Not because I loved the work me back scream by noon, but because every time Lucas's gaze lingered, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not hope. Not exactly, but a spark. Like maybe I wasn't just a screw-up. Days blurred into weeks. I learned to saddle a horse, to mend a fence without cursing, to ignore the ache in my muscles. Lucas was a hard ass, no question, but he was fair. He'd show me a task once, then expect me to get it right. When I did, he'd nod, just a small one, but it felt like a trophy. One night, after a long day herding cattle, we sat by a fire outside the bunkhouse. The stars were brighter than I'd ever seen, like someone had spilled diamonds across the sky. The other hands were inside, but Lucas stayed, passing me a beer. You're not half bad, city boy, he said, his voice softer than usual. I snorted, taking a swig. High praise. He chuckled, and the sound warmed me more than the fire. Why'd you come out here, Ethan? Really? I stared into the flames, the question digging deeper than I wanted. Needed the money. Needed a change. He didn't push, but his silence felt like an invitation. I glanced at him, his face half lit by the fire, and my heart did something stupid. I wanted to tell him everything about the fights with my parents, the years of feeling like I didn't fit anywhere, the way his presence made me question what I thought I knew about myself. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I asked, what about you? Why this place? Lucas leaned back, his hat casting a shadow over his eyes. Grew up on this land. My dad was a rancher. His dad before him. It's in my blood, I guess. Sounds like you love it, I said, surprised by the envy in my voice. Love's a strong word. He paused, then met my gaze. But yeah, it's home. That night, lying in my bunk, I couldn't shake the way he'd looked at me. It wasn't just attraction, though God knows that was there. It was something deeper, like he saw the parts of me I'd spent years hiding. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered if I could be more than just a guy running from his past. The next day, Lucas pulled me aside after breakfast. Got a special job for you, he said, his tone unreadable. You up for it? I nodded, ignoring the flutter in my chest. What's the job? He grinned, and it was the kind of grin that promised trouble. You'll see. Lucas led me to the far edge of the ranch, where the land dipped into a valley cradling a herd of wild mustangs. Their coats gleamed under the morning sun, and their restless energy made the air feel alive. We're moving them to the north pasture, he said, tossing me a rope. Think you can handle it? I stared at the rope, then at the horses, their hooves kicking up dust like they knew I was out of my depth. You're joking, right? His laugh was low, warm. You'll be fine. Just follow my lead. The task was brutal hours of riding, shouting, and dodging hooves as we corralled the herd. My thighs burned, my hands blistered, but Lucas was relentless, guiding me with sharp commands and sharper patience. By midday, we'd done it, the Mustangs safe in their new pasture. I was sweating, sore, and stupidly proud. Good work, Lucas said, clapping my shoulder. His hand lingered a second too long, and my pulse spiked. You're tougher than you look, city boy. I wanted to say something clever, but all I managed was a grin. Told you I learned fast. That night, we rode back to the ranch under a sky bruised purple. Lucas was quieter than usual, his jaw tight. I thought it was exhaustion until he spoke. You ever feel like you're running from something, Ethan? The question hit like a punch. I nodded, my throat tight. All the time. He didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer. But as we rode side by side, the silence between us felt heavier, charged with things unsaid. I wondered what he was running from, because a guy like Lucas, steady as the mountains, didn't strike me as someone who ran from anything. Back at the bunkhouse, the other hands were rowdy, playing cards and swapping stories. I stayed outside, leaning against the porch rail, staring at the stars. Lucas joined me, his shoulder brushing mine. You're not like the others, he said softly. They're here for the work. You're searching. I swallowed hard. Maybe I'm just lost. He turned to me, his eyes catching the moonlight. Maybe you're exactly where you need to be. My heart pounded, and for a moment, I thought he might lean closer. But he stepped back, tipping his hat. Get some sleep, Ethan. Big day tomorrow. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay awake, replaying his words, his touch, the way his presence made me feel alive in a way I hadn't since I was a kid. I'd spent years building walls against my family, against the world, but Lucas was slipping through the cracks. The next week was a blur of work, mending fences, hauling hay, learning to read the land like Lucas did. He taught me how to spot a storm coming by the way the wind shifted, how to calm a spooked horse with a steady hand. Every lesson felt like more than just ranch work. It felt like he was teaching me how to be steady, too. One afternoon, we were repairing a gate when a shout came from the main house. One of the hands, a guy named Jake, had gotten caught in some machinery. Blood was everywhere, and panic spread like wildfire. Lucas took charge, barking orders to get Jake free and bandaged while I stood frozen. Useless. Ethan. Lucas's voice snapped me out of it. Get the truck. Now. I ran, heart racing, and drove the truck to the scene. Lucas and another hand loaded Jake in, and we sped toward the nearest hospital, an hour away. Lucas drove, his knuckles white on the wheel, while I sat in the back with Jake, pressing a rag to his wound, trying not to lose it. At the hospital, Jake was rushed into surgery. Lucas and I waited in the sterile waiting room, the silence between us thick with tension. You did good back there, he said finally, his voice low. I didn't do anything, I muttered, guilt gnawing at me. You kept your head. That's more than most would have done. I looked at him, his face drawn with worry but still strong. Still Lucas. How do you do it? I asked. Stay calm like that. He leaned back, exhaling. You just do. People depend on you, so you don't get to fall apart. I wanted to ask more, to dig into what made him tick, but a nurse interrupted with news. Jake would be okay. Just needed stitches and rest. Relief flooded me, but Lucas's expression didn't soften. He was still carrying something heavy, something I couldn't name. Back at the ranch, life resumed its rhythm, but something had shifted. Lucas started seeking me out more small moments, like sharing coffee at dawn or riding together to check the herd. Each time, I felt that spark grow, a dangerous mix of want and fear. I'd been burned before, falling for guys who didn't feel the same, or worse, who did but wouldn't admit it. Lucas was different, but I couldn't shake the fear that I was reading him wrong. One evening, as we cleaned the stables, he broke the silence. You ever think about staying? Long term, I mean. The question caught me off guard. Here. I don't know. Never thought past the next paycheck. He nodded, like he expected that. Fair enough. But you fit here, Ethan. More than you think. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But I'd spent so long running. I wasn't sure I knew how to stay. The Montana summer was fading, the air turning crisp, and I felt the clock ticking on my time at the double bar. I hadn't planned to stay this long 3 months now, but the ranch had a way of sinking its hooks into you. Or maybe it was Lucas. He was everywhere, in every corner of my days. Mornings started with his voice calling out tasks. Evenings ended with us sharing a quiet moment by the fire. I caught myself watching him, how his hands moved sure and steady, how his laugh could shift the mood of the whole crew. It was dangerous, letting myself feel this much, but I couldn't stop. One day, we were out checking fences when a storm rolled in, fast and mean. The sky turned black, lightning cracking like it was trying to split the world in two. Lucas grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a small shed for shelter. We barely made it inside before the rain hit, a wall of water that drowned out everything else. Inside, it was cramped, the air thick with the smell of wet wood and hay. Lucas shook the rain from his hat, his shirt clinging to his chest in a way that made it hard to think straight. Hell of a storm, he said, glancing at me. Yeah, I managed, my voice rough. Our shoulders brushed as we stood there, the space too small for anything else. My heart was hammering, and not just from the thunder. You okay? He asked, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, but I wasn't. Not really. Being this close to him, with the world shut out by the storm, made every wall I'd built feel paper thin. Lucas, I started, then stopped. What was I even going to say? That I couldn't stop thinking about him. That he was the first person in years who made me feel like I belonged somewhere. He waited, patient, his gaze steady. What is it, Ethan? I took a breath, the words spilling out before I could stop them. Why do you keep me around? I'm not like the others. I'm not built for this. He frowned, stepping closer. You think you're not? Hell, Ethan, you've been out here busting your ass, learning faster than anyone I've seen. You're tougher than you give yourself credit for. It's not just that, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what I'm doing here. With you. The air between us shifted, heavy with something unspoken. Lucas's jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought he'd brush it off, like he always did when things got too real. But then he spoke, his voice low and raw. You think I don't feel it too? My breath caught. Feel what? He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of him. This, whatever the hell this is between us. Time stopped. The storm raged outside, but in that shed, it was just us two guys standing on the edge of something neither of us could name. I wanted to reach for him, to close the gap, but fear held me back. I'd been here before, wanting too much, and it always ended in pain. Lucas didn't move either, but his eyes held mine, fierce and unguarded. I don't know what you're running from, Ethan, but you don't have to run from me. Before I could respond, a crack of thunder shook the shed, and the moment broke. Lucas stepped back, clearing his throat. We should get back once this lets up. The ride back was quiet, the rain slowing to a drizzle. I replayed his words over and over, my heart a mess of hope and doubt. He felt it too. But what did that mean? Lucas was the foreman, the guy who held this place together. I was just a drifter, passing through. Could we really be anything more? The next few days were tense. Lucas kept his distance, throwing himself into work like he was trying to outrun something. I did the same, but every glance we shared felt like a spark waiting to ignite. The other hands noticed. Too. Jake, back from the hospital, raised an eyebrow when he caught us talking too long. Careful, city boy, he teased. Boss don't take kindly to distractions. I laughed it off, but his words stuck. Was I a distraction? Or was Lucas as caught up in this as I was? One night, after a long day branding cattle, Lucas found me by the corral, staring at the horizon. You're quiet tonight, he said, leaning against the fence beside me. Just thinking, I said. About what you said. In the shed. He tensed, but didn't look away. Meant every word. I turned to him, my heart in my throat. Then why do you keep pulling back? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. It's not that simple, Ethan. This place, these people, they rely on me. I can't just do whatever I want. You think I don't get that? I said, frustration spilling over. I'm not asking for promises, Lucas. I need to know if this is real. He looked at me, his eyes raw with something I couldn't name. It's real, he said quietly. More real than anything I've felt in a long time. My chest tightened, and before I could think, I stepped closer. He didn't move away. For a moment, we just stood there, the world fading to nothing but the space between us. Then, slowly, he reached out, his hand brushing mine. It was small, tentative, but it felt like everything. That touch, Lucas's hand brushing mine, changed everything. It was like a dam breaking, years of holding back crashing down in a single moment. We didn't kiss, didn't speak, but the weight of his fingers against mine said more than words ever could. The next morning, I woke with a knot in my stomach, half expecting Lucas to act like nothing happened. But when I saw him at breakfast, his eyes met mine with a quiet intensity, like he was daring me to meet him halfway. I wanted to God. I wanted to, but fear gnawed at me. I'd spent so long guarding myself, and letting someone in felt like handing them a knife. Work kept us busy, but the air between us crackled. We were herding cattle that day, riding side by side under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Lucas was all business, shouting orders to the crew, But every now and then, he'd glance my way, and I'd catch a flicker of something soft in his eyes. That evening, he found me in the barn, brushing down one of the horses. "You're getting good at that," he said, leaning against the stall. "Had a good teacher," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Ethan, about last night." "Don't." I cut him off, my heart racing. "Don't say it was a mistake." He frowned, surprised. I wasn't going to say that. "Then what?" I asked, turning to face him. The horse snorted behind me, but all I could see was Lucas, his face lit by the dim barn light. I was going to say. He hesitated, then took a breath. "I don't know how to do this. Nobody here knows about me. Not like this." The confession hit me hard. Lucas, the unshakable Foreman, was scared. Just like me. "Nobody knows about me either," I admitted. "Not here. Not back home." He nodded, like he'd expected that. "This place, it's not exactly welcoming to guys like us. If the others found out, they won't," I said, stepping closer. "Not unless we want them to." His eyes searched mine, and for the first time, I saw the weight he carried, not just the ranch, but the secrets, the loneliness. I reached out, my hand grazing his arm. "We don't have to figure it all out now," I said. "Just don't pull away." He didn't. Instead, he leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. It wasn't a kiss, but it was close, and it was enough to make my chest ache with possibility. The next few weeks were a tightrope walk. We stole moments when we could a brush of hands in the tack room, a shared look across the fire. Every touch felt like a risk, but it was worth it. I was falling for him, hard and fast, and the scariest part was that I didn't want to stop. But the ranch wasn't a bubble. Rumors started swirling, nothing concrete. Just whispers among the hands about how Lucas spent too much time with the new guy. Jake cornered me one day, his tone half teasing, half serious. "You and the boss seem tight. Hope you're not getting any ideas." I laughed it off, but my stomach churned. That night, I told Lucas about it. We were alone in the hayloft, the stars visible through a crack in the roof. "They're starting to talk," I said, my voice low. "Let him talk," he said, but his jaw was tight. "They don't know anything." "They will if we're not careful," I said. "And then what?" He didn't answer right away, and that silence scared me more than anything. Finally, he said, "I've spent my whole life hiding. Ethan, I'm tired of it. But this place, it's my home. If I lose it, you won't," I said, grabbing his hand. "We'll figure it out. Together." He looked at me, his eyes fierce. "You make me want things I didn't think I could have." My heart stuttered. "Like what?" "Like you," he said simply, and then he kissed me. It was slow, tentative at first, then deeper, like we'd both been starving for it. His hands cupped my face, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. When we pulled apart, breathless, he smiled a real, unguarded smile that made my chest hurt. But the world doesn't stop for moments like that. The next day, one of the older hands, a guy named Carl, caught us talking too close behind the barn. He didn't say anything, but his eyes narrowed, and I knew we'd been careless. That night, Lucas was tense, his usual calm replaced by a restless energy. "We need to be smarter," he said, pacing the bunkhouse porch. "If this gets out, it's not just gossip. It could ruin everything." I wanted to argue, to tell him we could handle it, but the fear in his voice stopped me. "What do you want to do?" I asked. He stopped, looking at me like he was memorizing my face. "I don't know." but I'm not letting you go. The kiss in the hayloft lingered like a promise, but it came with a shadow. Lucas and I were playing with fire, and the ranch was a tinderbox. Every glance, every stolen moment felt like a gamble, but walking away wasn't an option, not anymore. We tried to be careful. No more late-night talks where anyone could see. No more lingering touches. But it was like trying to hold back a river. I'd catch Lucas's eye across the corral, and my heart would race. He'd brush past me in the barn, and I'd forget how to breathe. We were falling deeper, and the deeper we fell, the harder it was to hide. Carl's suspicion wasn't the only problem. The ranch owner, a gruff old man named Mr. Hargrove, showed up unannounced one morning. He was all business, inspecting the land and barking at Lucas about profits and deadlines. I kept my head down, but I felt his eyes on me, like he was sizing up the weak link. "Heard you've got a new guy?" Hargrove said to Lucas. His tone clipped. "Hope he's worth the trouble." "He's pulling his weight," Lucas said, his voice steady but tight. Hargrove grunted, unconvinced. "Better be. I don't pay for dead weight." After he left, Lucas was on edge, snapping at the crew over small mistakes. I cornered him later, away from the others. "What's got you so wound up?" I asked. He rubbed his jaw, frustration etched into every line of his face. "Hargrove's been looking to cut costs. If he thinks the ranch isn't running smooth, he'll start making changes. And if he gets wind of us," he didn't finish, but he didn't need to. I knew what was at stake, not just his job, but his home, his legacy. "We'll be careful," I said, but the words felt hollow. How do you hide something that feels like the only real thing in your life? That night, we met in secret, far from the bunkhouse, in a clearing surrounded by pines. The moon was full, casting silver light over Lucas's face as he pulled me close. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough. "I didn't mean to drag you into this mess." "You didn't drag me anywhere," I said, gripping his jacket. "I'm here because I want to be." He kissed me then, fierce and desperate, like he was trying to hold on to something that might slip away. I kissed him back, pouring everything into ivory fear, every hope, every piece of myself I'd kept locked away. For a moment, the world was just us, and nothing else mattered. But reality always creeps back in. The next day, Carl cornered me while I was stacking hay. "You and Lucas think you're slick," he said, his voice low and mean. "I see the way you look at each other. You're going to bring trouble to this place." I froze, my heart pounding. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" He stepped closer, his eyes hard. "I've been around long enough to know what's what. You keep this up, and Hargrove will have both your hides." I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth was written all over me. I walked away, my stomach in knots, and found Lucas by the corral. I told him what Carl said, expecting him to brush it off, but his face darkened. "I'll handle it," he said, his voice cold. "Don't," I said, grabbing his arm. "If you confront him, it'll just make it worse." He pulled away, his eyes flashing. "What do you want me to do, Ethan?" "Let him spread lies. Ruin everything." "He doesn't have proof," I said, desperate to calm him. "We just need to be more careful." "Careful," he repeated, bitter. "I'm so damn tired of being careful." I didn't know what to say. The weight of it all, his fear, mine. The secrets we were carrying was crushing us. For the first time, I wondered if this was worth it. Not Lucas, never Lucas, but the risk, the hiding, the constant looking over our shoulders. That night, I couldn't sleep. I slipped out of the bunkhouse and sat by the fire pit, staring at the embers. Lucas found me, his face drawn, We need to talk, he said, sitting beside me. I know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is getting out of hand. He nodded, his hands clasped tight. I've been thinking, maybe we should cool it. Just for a while. Until things settle down. The words hit like a slap. You mean break it off? No, he said quickly, grabbing my hand. Not break it off. Just take a step back. For both our sakes. I pulled my hand away, hurt and anger twisting inside me. So we hide even more. Pretend this doesn't exist. Ethan, I'm trying to protect us, he said, his voice breaking. If Hargrove finds out, I could lose the ranch. You could lose your job. I can't let that happen. I wanted to argue, to tell him we could fight for this, but the look in his eyes stopped me. He wasn't just scared for himself, was scared for me. Okay, I said finally, my throat tight. We'll cool it. But as I walked back to the bunkhouse, alone, I felt like I was leaving a piece of myself behind. The days after our talk were a slow bleed. Lucas and I kept our distance, sticking to work, avoiding each other's eyes. Every time I saw him, my chest ached, but I played along, pretending everything was fine. The ranch kept turning cattle to herd, fences to fix, but the spark that had kept me going was gone. The other hands noticed the change. Jake tried to lighten the mood, cracking jokes about my city boy ways, but even he could tell something was off. Carl, on the other hand, watched us like a hawk, his smirk saying he thought he'd won. I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. He was just a product of this place, where secrets like ours were threats. Work was my only escape. I threw myself into it, volunteering for the hardest jobs, digging post holes, hauling feed, anything to keep my mind off Lucas. But he was still there, in every corner of the ranch, his presence like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. One afternoon, we got word of a missing calf, lost somewhere in the west pasture. Lucas put together a small crew to search, and I volunteered, hoping the task would drown out the noise in my head. We rode out under a gray sky, the air heavy with the threat of rain. Lucas led the way, his focus razor sharp, but I caught him glancing at me when he thought I wasn't looking. We found the calf tangled in some brush, scared but unharmed. As we worked to free it, Lucas's hand brushed mine, and for a second, neither of us pulled away. The moment passed, but it left me raw, like a wound reopened. On the ride back, the rain finally came, a cold, steady drizzle. The others rode ahead, but Lucas hung back, matching my pace. You okay? He asked, his voice almost lost in the rain. No, I said, too tired to lie. You. He shook his head, water dripping from his hat. This isn't what I wanted. Ethan. Then why are we doing it? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Why are we letting everyone else decide what we can be? He didn't answer right away, his jaw tight. Finally, he said, because I don't know how to do this without losing everything. I wanted to scream, to tell him he was already losing me, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I rode ahead, letting the rain hide the tears I didn't want him to see. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, half in, half out, torn between what I wanted and what was safe. I started packing my bag, each item a reminder of how far I'd come and how much I was leaving behind. Lucas found me in the bunkhouse, my duffel half full. What the hell are you doing? He asked, his voice low and urgent. I'm leaving, I said, not looking at him. I can't do this anymore. Lucas. The hiding, the pretending, it's killing me. He grabbed my arm, turning me to face him. You think it's not killing me too? You think I want this? Then fight for it. I snapped, pulling free. Fight for us. Or let me go. His eyes blazed, but he didn't speak. For a moment, I thought he'd let me walk away. Then he stepped closer, his voice breaking. I'm scared, Ethan. Scared of losing you. Scared of losing this place. But I'm more scared of living without you. My breath caught. Then don't. He kissed me then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to pour everything into that one moment. I kissed him back, my hands fisting in his jacket, and for a second, it felt like we could make it work, like we could beat the odds. But the bunkhouse door creaked open, and Carl's voice cut through the moment like a knife. Well, damn. I knew it. We sprang apart, my heart pounding. Carl stood there, his face a mix of disgust and triumph. Hargrove's gonna love hearing about this, he said, turning to leave. Lucas moved faster than I'd ever seen, grabbing Carl's arm. You say a word, and you're done here, he growled. Carl yanked free, sneering. You're the one who's done. Hayes. He stormed out, and the silence that followed was deafening. Lucas turned to me, his face pale. We're screwed, he said, his voice hollow. No, I said, grabbing his hand. We're not. We'll figure this out. Together. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of what was coming. Carl wouldn't keep quiet, and Hargrove wasn't the type to let this slide. We were standing on the edge of a cliff, and I wasn't sure we could keep from falling. The next morning, the ranch felt like a powder keg. Carl's threat hung over us, and every glance from the other hands felt like a judgment. Lucas was all business, assigning tasks with a clipped tone, but I could see the strain in his eyes. We hadn't slept, spending the night in the hayloft, talking through our options, none of them good. We could deny it, I said at one point, my voice hoarse. Say Carl's lying. Lucas shook his head. He saw us, Ethan, and he's not the type to let it go. Then we come clean, I said, the words tasting like ash. Tell Hargrove ourselves, before Carl does. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. And lose everything. This ranch is my life. It's not your whole life, I said, grabbing his hand. Not anymore. He didn't pull away, but his silence said enough. He was torn, and I hated that I was part of the reason why. By noon, the tension broke. Hargrove's truck rolled into the yard, and Carl was with him, his smirk visible from across the ranch. Lucas and I exchanged a look, and I knew what was coming. We met them by the main house, the other hands lingering nearby, sensing trouble. Hayes, Hargrove barked, his eyes cold. Carl here says you've been inappropriate with the new guy. That true? Lucas stood tall, his jaw set. What's true is I've been running this ranch better than ever. Cattle are healthy. Fences are up. Profits are steady. That's what should matter. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. Don't dodge the question. You know what I'm asking. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. It's true, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. And it's not just on Lucas. It's me, too. The yard went silent, the hands staring like I'd just set off a bomb. Hargrove's face turned red, his voice low and dangerous. You think I'm running a damn soap opera here? This is a ranch, not a place for whatever the hell this is. Lucas stepped in front of me, his voice calm but firm. Ethan's a good worker. Best I've seen in years. You want to fire him. You're firing me too. My breath caught. I hadn't expected that, not now. Not ever. Hargrove looked between us, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, you've got till sundown to pack your things. Both of you. He walked away, Carl trailing behind, his smirk wider than ever. The other hands dispersed, some muttering, others avoiding our eyes. Jake caught my arm as we headed back to the bunkhouse. That was ballsy, he said quietly. Stupid, but ballsy. I managed a weak smile. Thanks, I think. Lucas and I packed in silence, the weight of what we'd lost settling over us. The ranch had been my lifeline, but for Lucas, it was home, his family's legacy, his whole world. And I'd helped take it away. I'm sorry, I said, my voice breaking as I zipped my duffel. Don't, he said, his hand on mine. You didn't do this. We did. I looked at him, his face drawn but resolute. What now? I asked. He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine. We start over. Somewhere else. Together. The words should have felt like a lifeline, but they scared me. I'd never had someone choose me like this. Never had someone risk everything. You sure? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, that same unguarded smile from the hayloft. Never been more sure. We loaded our bags into my truck, the ranch fading into the dusk behind us. As we drove away, I felt the weight of the past months, the fear, the hope, the love that had grown despite everything. Lucas reached over, his hand resting on mine, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running. We didn't know where we were going. Not exactly. But as the Montana plains stretched out before us, I realized it didn't matter. We'd find a place, maybe another ranch, maybe something entirely new. What mattered was that we were together, and that was more than I'd ever dared to hope for. The road stretched endless under a sky painted with stars, my truck's engine humming as Lucas and I drove into the unknown. We didn't have a plan, just a tank of gas and each other. But for the first time in years, I felt free. Not the kind of free that comes from running, but the kind that comes from really choosing what you want. We stopped at a diner just over the Wyoming border, the neon sign buzzing in the dark. Inside, it was all cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt dreams. Lucas slid into the seat across from me, his hat on the table, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. So, he said, stirring his coffee, what's the plan, city boy? I laughed, the sound surprising me. You're asking me. You're the one who's supposed to have all the answers. He grinned, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Guess we're both winging it. We talked for hours, the diner emptying around us. Lucas told me about his childhood on the ranch, the way his dad taught him to ride before he could walk, the way he'd always known he was different but buried it deep. I told him about Chicago, about the fights with my parents, the years of drifting, the loneliness I'd carried like a second skin. It wasn't easy, laying ourselves bare like that, but it felt right, like we were building something new from the pieces of our pasts. By the time we left, the sky was turning pink, dawn creeping over the horizon. We drove on, heading south, no destination in mind. Lucas found a job listing on his phony small ranch in Colorado looking for hands. Could be a start, he said, glancing at me. Could be, I said, my heart lifting. As long as they don't mind a couple of troublemakers. He laughed, his hand finding mine on the gear shift. They'll be lucky to have us. The Colorado ranch was smaller than the Double Bar, nestled in a valley with mountains that seemed to touch the sky. The owner, a woman named Maria, didn't blink when we showed up together, our hands brushing as we unloaded our gear. Work hard, and you're welcome here, she said, her voice warm but firm. It wasn't acceptance. Not exactly, but it was enough. We settled in, falling into a rhythm that felt familiar but new. Lucas was still a leader, guiding the crew with that same steady confidence. But there was a lightness to him now, like he'd shed a weight he'd carried too long. I worked beside him, learning the land, learning him, learning myself in a way I never had before. One night, after a long day, we sat on a hill overlooking the valley. A blanket spread beneath us. The stars were out, brighter even than in Montana, and Lucas's arm was warm around my shoulders. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't taken that job?" he asked. "All the time," I said, leaning into him. "I'd probably be sleeping in my truck somewhere, broke and miserable." He chuckled, his breath warm against my cheek. "And I'd still be hiding, pretending I was fine alone." I turned to him, my heart full. "We're not alone anymore." He kissed me then, soft and slow, and it felt like a promise not just of love, but of a life we could build together. The world wasn't perfect. We'd face more whispers, more judgment, maybe even more losses. But we'd face them together, and that made all the difference. Years later, I'd look back on that summer in Montana as the moment everything changed. I'd taken a job for money, for survival, but what I found was so much more at home. A purpose, a love that was worth every risk. Lucas and I didn't just survive. We built something real, something lasting. And as we sat under those Colorado stars, I knew we'd keep building, one day at a time, for as long as we had.